to orient ourselves, the very first thing is just to kind of see our repository, kind of what it's all about and how we have it structured, and then how you might be able to use it. So yeah, if you come to our GitHub here, you'll actually see that there's only 3 pinned repositories. We try to really package everything into 3 places because we know if you're pulling down dozens of different repositories, it can get confusing and you don't know where things are. So we've really slimmed it down to just 3 primary repositories that we've pinned. So the first one here is this RAIR dApp Monorepo. And this is our entire source code all in one monorepo. So rather than having to go multiple places and glue together multiple things, it's all right here for you with each microservice as its own subfolder. So when you want to use our system, you can just git clone this entire repo as is, and it has everything that you'll need to get started. The front end, our entire open source backend, our streaming engine, and the syncing engine as well. And that's the thing that basically communicates with the blockchain and then informs our database to update. So yeah, there is the whole monorepo. And then what we've done over here in this official library is we've made a bunch of different versions of our front end. This is also based on some feedback from Simon and his team from the last hackathon. And yeah, we're really proud that we were able to put this together in the last few weeks. A bunch of different customized front ends that then allow you to take a different track and do different use cases. So I'll get into some of those a little bit more later. And then finally, the RAIR Solidity folder. If anyone is adventurous and wants to interact directly with our Solidity contracts, all of those are in this repository. And we actually just added this really awesome guide here, this markdown file that our amazing backend developer Juan put together that actually tells you every single step-by-step thing that you need to do to deploy all of our smart contracts onto a new Ethereum virtual machine compatible blockchain. So anyway, that's really cool. I'll kind of mention that at the end. So perfect. With that, I'm going to switch over here and then go through this nice guide that we wrote in preparation for the meeting. Before I start, just wanted to ask if Simon or Suresh wanted to say hi real quick and say anything before I officially get started.
Look, a great start.
I think you should be able to turn your
folks have
microphone on.
raised their
Or
hands.
if not, I can just jump right into
Some of
it.
the students have raised their hands. Maybe you can take their questions. Like Ayush, Karima, Mayank, and Pratika, they have raised their hands. So perhaps they want to ask something.
Sure. Yeah, we can do it real quick now, and then I'll go through the guide, and then we can do one more quick Q&A at the end. So yeah, absolutely. Why don't we take just a couple of questions right now?
Piyush has raised his hand.
Oh, I see. Perfect.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Am I audible?
Yep, you sound great.
I have a question that I wanted to build something on Solana blockchain. Do we get the support regarding that or any source code repository?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the syncing partner that we use, Alchemy, I think is also a sponsor of the event. Their syncing engine and all of their infrastructure tooling does also work with the Solana blockchain. You know, in theory, our system could also work with the Solana blockchain in that we have an off-chain Mongo database pre-configured, Redis, things like that, all pre-configured and ready to go. It's just right now we're using EVM-based blockchains. But I would say because of the fully open source nature of our system, if you wanted to write data, you know, ultimately wherever you're filling block space is almost, of course it is a nuance and you have to code specially for Solana. But I would say our system actually could still be useful in that case. It's just, it won't work right out of the box. You'd have to do a little bit of customization to get it to work with Solana.
I can also chime in here. Hey, everybody. I'm Ivan, the CMO at C#. Solana used one of our sponsors. So if you have any questions regarding how to use Solana, just type it in here and we'll get it answered. Some of them will be at the event, either virtually or physically. So, but you can also ask questions in advance.
Awesome, cool. Well, we could take one more, maybe if you have a question, and then we'll jump back into the overview doc.
Yeah, Bidu has a question.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Hello. Am I audible?
Hi.
Yes, you're right. Yeah.
So I had a question. So like I'm not really good at like coding stuff, and this Web3 is also pretty new to me. So like, what can I search, or like what can I practice to explore more about it, and also to prepare for the hackathon?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And actually, the kind of intro part of our welcome guide that basically don't be scared by Web3 because it's basically just Web2 development that has a little bit of extra part where you do communicate with the blockchain. So I would say the best way to get started is, I think, our approach that you can deploy a completely working application using Docker. If you're familiar with the Docker process, get something pre-built that's up and running and works. And then, basically starting by modifying the front end just a little bit. We have kind of standard React-based front end that is all pre-configured that then works at the back end. If you started that way, you could at least get a positive result. Basically deploy a very simple application that allows you to connect a wallet and do some syncing. And then from there, kind of take it into whatever your individual use case is that you want to build. The easiest way to get started is just to see something simple that works and then start tinkering with it and modifying it from there.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, that was such a good segue because that was exactly what I was going to say in the beginning of my chat anyways. So let's dig right into it. All right. So if we go over here, this is our Git book. So this is our core knowledge base. Of course, we have everything in Markdown natively in the repository, if you like to do the readmes directly there. But I really like the Git book as it's a place that we can add more nuanced and more specific documentation. So I just made this big kind of article here just for this presentation. And I figured we would use this as our guide for today, and then go through how our repository works, how you go about installing it, and then to skip ahead to the end, something really fun that you could build, which would be minting AI chats as NFTs. I think actually, with you, the question you asked really answers this whole first part of, I'm not very familiar with Web3. It sounds scary. It sounds like there's a lot of underlying more back-end things that I would need to do to be a successful Web3 developer. And yeah, I'm here today to tell you that that's not actually true. You can be a really, really good Web3 developer just by being a regular Web2 developer and using all of the frameworks that you're already familiar with, like React, Vite.js, things like that. So just as a high-level background of RAIRprotocol, we've been around for 4 years. We raised some seed funding to build enterprise NFT marketplace infrastructure and digital rights management infrastructure. This would be basically checking on the blockchain that you own the thing that you say you own, and then unlocking some kind of digital experience, be it a Zoom meeting or a streaming video, something like that. So that was our original product. And about 6 months ago, we decided to fully open source 100% of all of our code base, which I'm really proud of. And I think was a really good decision for us because it means that instead of just our core team being able to improve and make our system better, the whole world, including everyone on this call, could do the same. So if you look in our repository here, you see we're at almost 5,000 commits. So we've moved over just an incredible amount of code. Really tried our hardest to document everything properly, document the API, document exactly how the code base works. But I will say it is a production enterprise grade code base. So that's just a kind of a new thing to get familiar with. So if you've ever wanted to see, how a full front end, a full back end, a full cloud setup all works in a real production grade scenario, this is it. And it's all out there, 100% open for you to pull down and play with. So a little bit about us. Perfect. And then, of course, Web3 isn't scary. The majority of the development that we anticipate for the hackathon actually can be almost more of a DevOps-like task with some mild front-end enhancements and tweaks. I think with that approach, you can actually get a working dApp built in the very limited time constraint that is the hackathon. If you only have a few days to build something, this strategy of taking an existing working application and then modifying it a little bit could be very useful. So, as I mentioned in the beginning, the structure of our repository is everything is in this Monorepo. over here, this RAIR Monorepo, so it's all in one place. And then each one of these are individual microservices. The front end, the back end, the streaming engine, and the syncing engine. The way that we make it really easy for everyone to deploy quickly is we use a thing called Docker. And I would love to just see show of hands, or if you just put in the chat if you do have any experience with Docker, as containerization is certainly the way to build production applications. Once you containerize each one of your microservices and deploy it with Docker, that means that feasibly you could create thousands of containers. If you do containerize and deploy your code with Docker, it has the ability to scale. So that's why we use Docker, both for ease of use and for scalability. On the ease of use point, I will open up one of these YAML files here real quick. At a really high level, the way that Docker works is you're passing in these different variables that tell the system how you would like it to be configured at build time. And basically, to run our system, we give you a lot of these keys actually pre-written in the environment variable sample file. So you actually don't even have to go out and do any configuration on your own. It will basically just work out of the box. But the goal is to slowly make this not our application, but your own application. And that would be things like in here, if you wanted to, say, make an interesting dApp that opens up a Zoom meeting, but only opens up that Zoom meeting if somebody pays, I don't know, a certain amount of tokens, like 10,000 tokens, then it will unlock the Zoom meeting. That would be a really cool and interesting application, I think. Could do a therapy app or a coding help app, or anything fun like that. But you would need to go into Zoom and then get the Zoom API key and then paste it in here. The one other note that I'll make is this Alchemy API key. Alchemy is a really interesting, awesome company. They do a lot of the behind the scenes infrastructure for you, so that you don't have to do all of the really hard stuff in blockchain. And by that, I mean specifically syncing with the blockchain. So every time there's a transaction on chain, there's some data that's written to this public database. Well, your application can't actually see that or know that that transaction happened unless you sync it and then bring it into your own database, or somehow reference what happened on chain. So that's just one example. Alchemy does a lot of things that aren't just syncing, and it's called RPC, the syncing technology. It does a lot of things other than RPC, but that is a huge, very, very valuable thing to sync with the blockchain for you. So effectively, to get Alchemy to work with our system, you would just go to Alchemy, create a free account with them, which I think Simon and Ivan could probably point you to the right resource to go. Grab the key and then effectively just paste it into this file and then run Docker. I would say generally that is the strategy that you can use to slowly make the system your own. Awesome. Okay, cool. So that, I think, covers a little bit of installation, but now I'll chat about very specific installation things that you might run into. Again, with Docker, the way that you run Docker is you install it inside of an Ubuntu machine. And I know a lot of you guys are on Windows, which is totally fine. I also use Windows, and we've tested and our system works really well with the Windows subsystem for Linux, as long as you have 8 GB of RAM. So if you want to try to deploy our system on localhost, you can run WSL. It won't hurt or mess with your computer. It's totally a fine thing that Microsoft provides. And then you can actually install Docker into that system and run our application that way. The other thing I would really like to highlight too, as fun as deploying something to localhost is, if you want to build a dApp that thousands or millions of people all around the world use, of course it can't just sit on your own laptop. It has to be out on a cloud virtual machine. So really the process to install Docker on localhost or onto VM is nearly identical. All you have to do is root into a virtualized version of Linux rather than your own computer, and deploy the system the same way. And to help with that, at least for this hackathon, we have several Contabo virtual machine boxes that Suresh will have the root access for and the root passwords for. So, at the end of the hackathon, whoever is able to deploy things nicely on localhost, we're definitely there to help you also get your application up on a cloud. And then, further into the future, through this really awesome partnership with a Web3 cloud platform. You'll even be able to get your system up and running natively on this Akash cloud. But of course, you don't have to use Docker for everything, because obviously building a container for the sample front end that you'll be building for the hackathon might not make total sense. So there's also a way to use a non-Docker version of the front end, but then still use our Dockerized backend and syncing service and etc. And those should both work exactly the same way. They're both pre-configured to the port 8088. So you would just turn down the Docker version and then you could run your local one. Awesome, cool. Well, I think that's enough of the kind of boring housekeeping stuff. I thought I'd try to leave as much time as we can to talk about fun things that you could build and some interesting feedback that Suresh was kind of telling me from the last hackathon on types of projects that those students were trying to build, and maybe ways that you could use our system to try to build some really cool, fun, interesting applications. So before we jump into that, though, let me actually show you what a deployed version of our system looks like here, or actually maybe a couple of versions of our system. Cool. So this is our default. This is the default application that will run when you basically just Docker run our system. And it's kind of interesting. There are a lot of pieces and subcomponents to this very sophisticated production grade dApp. But we feel by fully open sourcing it, you can use different elements and different components of it yourself to much more quickly build your own application. So you don't need to build your own notification system. You don't need to build your own file settings. All of those things. Amazing. So yeah, this is the default system that you'll deploy. And if you don't want to deploy this whole entire system, you can actually deploy a blank version of it that just basically has the header and the footer, and then you can put whatever your own unique application logic is inside of it. So one note I will make real quick, going back to this compose workflow and this env sample workflow. If you guys can all see this line here, RAIR dApp env sample, where it says admin NFT chain and it says admin NFT contract. What this is doing, it's basically for you to have permissions to modify the system and use all of the administrator tooling, you have to have an NFT that's associated with this address on this particular blockchain. This blockchain here, 0x2105, is the base blockchain, which is a really cool, fast, very affordable blockchain where you can do interactions for almost free, not totally free, but almost free on the base blockchain. So to actually use the super administrator settings of our system, you have to come over to one of our pre-configured systems here, like this RAIRprotocol.xyz, actually come in and mint a free admin NFT. Once you have that in your wallet, you'll log in with either MetaMask or a social login, and then you'll have access to many server settings as well. You can code into this. You can even add or remove server settings if you want. By going through this flow, you basically have a nice, fully featured UX to modify the server. So let me just show kind of what that looks like here. Although I am currently logged in with the MetaMask version of our code. So actually with that version, I would buy this one down here. I would pay my own gas. But likely, or I'm pretty sure probably you guys don't have your own base Ethereum gas in your own MetaMask wallet, which is because it's hard. Like you gotta do all this work to get a little bit of base gas. So what we've done here is we've made this one, if you click buy, it's 100% free. And the reason it's 100% free is that Alchemy behind the scenes is sponsoring the gas for you, which is another amazing thing that Alchemy does, and also another amazing thing that you can put into your own application. So from a user adoption and user experience standpoint, if you build a Web3 application that is free for users versus a Web3 application that people have to go find gas and figure out how to click the buy button with gas, you'll have just basically two drastically different applications. One would be made for a native, much smaller but more sophisticated native Web3 audience, whereas the other one, anybody in the world could use, and they wouldn't really even know that they're using the blockchain. So with that, I will show that flow. You can log in Web3, that's the MetaMask or Coinbase wallet flow, or you can do the social logins flow. And we recommend Google, but you can use whatever you want. Once you deploy our application, your application will work just like this. You'll have the ability for users to log in with their social logins, use our other partner Web3 Auth to make them wallets, and then automatically dump them in to your application. And then once you're in the application, when you click the buy button through the social login flow and click buy and purchase, it's going to go out and it's going to go mint token number 154 for me here. You can also switch out this GIF. I just like The Simpsons, so we put it in here. But boom, that's it. That's the full flow. So that's the full flow that both you'll be doing to test our system, again, to get this admin NFT address. But also what's really cool is the same exact flow that you can then use yourself in your own applications. So if you want to build something where you can, again, go to a Zoom meeting to talk to a therapist or coding help or something like that, you could use this flow for your users to get the credential that they need for the meeting for free by just clicking that button. But, behind the scenes, it is actually interacting with the blockchain for you. So anyway, that's really cool, I think. So that's kind of our system in a nutshell. And, of course, over here, another demo server we've done. This one's like the beginnings of a carbon credit marketplace, things like that. A lot of things that you can do just out of the box with the system. And then, of course, much more you can do by modifying the underlying code. So yeah, to go back here, we've kind of recommended maybe 4 different types of problems that you might like to explore with our system. The first one, I think I've mentioned quite a bit already, is the second one I mentioned quite a bit already, the Zoom one. The first one here is pretty interesting. So in the last hackathon, there were a lot of student projects that were either interested in medical records, IoT devices, carbon credits, things like that. And they wanted to build, a sample application in a few days that would enable them to show off one of these use cases. So I've kind of bundled them all together into this thing called metadata. So, with our system, minting NFTs and then rich data to them in this metadata JSON format, that's going to allow you to basically do any of these use cases that you want. Because there's really, while there is a difference between a medical record and an IoT device, say, they're both a unique identifier. And if you can make a unique identifier on chain and then imbue that with some data, some metadata JSON data, then you can build all sorts of really cool applications that way. Of course, I mentioned the Zoom flow, although our current implementation of the Zoom flow is on a slightly older Zoom API. So if you want to play with that, just know it's not on the exact latest version of Zoom. We're still working on that, but should still be useful for you. And then this third one that I think I mentioned very briefly at the beginning of the call, this hard hat thing. So if anybody is Solidity minded, wants to do on-chain development work, then this would be a really interesting flow to explore. So there's a tool called Hard Hat, which most Ethereum developers use to deploy their smart contracts. And we've made a really nice guide for exactly how to deploy our smart contracts, this guide MD. And this is going to run you through all of the steps in Hard Hat in order to do that. And then you basically can point our existing Solidity code base to a totally different and new EVM. In fact, I guess the cat is out of the bag a little bit with Sony now. Sony is launching a blockchain, which was actually quite exciting. They mentioned it yesterday. So we're actually going to be doing this internally. We'll be using these same flows to then move all of our code base onto Sony's new blockchain. And of course, many partners associated with Hack India, like Avalanche, EVMs. I'm sure they would love to talk to you if you have the ability to help them migrate code bases onto their blockchains. Cool. And then finally, this is the most fun thing that I could think of. When Simon asked for, what are some samples or what are some things that would be really cool for a hackathon that you could use the RAIR protocol open source infrastructure to make faster and easier to build, I thought of this. I know we haven't done this. This is just purely a hypothetical that somebody could try, but I think would be immensely cool and interesting. So I'll go through this real quick, and then it's 9:05. So then, yeah, I think I can leave at least 15 minutes or so for Q&A. Make sure to answer everybody's questions. Awesome. So again, this is a very high level, just kind of rough guide of how you could use our system to feasibly integrate with any other code base, but specifically here for Akash chat. So as a real just quick intro on Akash chat, it is a totally open source version of basically it looks like ChatGPT, but is totally open source and is using any of these models here, Llama, Mistral, etc. You ask it questions, it provides the answers. But the actual compute platform that is powering this is not just a regular cloud like Google or Amazon or Azure or whatnot. It is the Akash cloud. So it is this immutable, permissionless cloud that you are paying tokens into to basically use, which is so cool. It's just such a cool thing. And this is one of their flagship applications is this, totally open source AI chatbot. So with an AI chatbot, I mean, it's already very powerful and you can do a lot of things with it. Our thought was, what if you embedded Akash chat inside of our system? So again, this is just a sketch of basically what it would look like. If you sort of very high level, create your own root in the front end, create your own special root called Akash chat, dig into the Akash SDK and dig into their documentation. You can figure out where all of their endpoints are to natively embed Akash chat inside of the front end of RAIRprotocol. The kind of fun step here, and I can even show this in their regular UI, is this is the JSON export format for the Akash chat, which is so cool. So of course I'm using the UI to click the export button, but I could also do this by hitting their API and I could actually get this result here. I could see all these interesting metadata attributes. Here's the name of the chat. Here's the version of the chat. Here's the model that made it. And then of course, here's the actual content itself. If you have that, then you could use our metadata engine to basically turn these into non-fungible tokens. And why would you want to do that? Well, the sky is kind of the limit for why something like that is cool and interesting. You could sell your chats. You could put them on the marketplace and people could buy and sell them, which is kind of fun. Two, you could just memorialize on chain that this specific thing happened on this specific date, which is in itself is very valuable. As you know, the AI stuff is quite fleeting and ephemeral and gets deleted. So you can basically make it permanent by putting it on chain. You can even take it one step further and then have certain chats that are only unlocked by tokens. Use our digital rights management engine for that. Really, like I said, the sky is the limit for the amount of cool things that you could do. And of course, with Akash chat natively, I mean, it is a nice experience that you have this whole chat bot. But if you are then wrapping Akash chat inside of RAIRprotocol, you're going to get a persistent profile that people can access with MetaMask or access with social login. You can start writing information on chain from Akash chat into these profiles. You really make the next, probably killer distributed application with this flow. Of course, put Akash chat not just in a general data set, but focus it maybe on a specific data set. That is a really high level overview of, just to review real quick, 4 years of enterprise code base that we've migrated open source that isn't scary to use because you can just use Docker and then is all in one nice mono repo. If you want to then add your own front end, you basically just switch out this one front end microservice with whatever your microservice is. And we've provided a few examples. We've provided a third web example and then just a simple single button example. And then of course, all the fun and interesting things that you might think of to build, including this cool Akash chat concept. So awesome. Well, with that, I'm going to turn off my screen share and turn the microphone back on for everybody. And yeah, I would love to answer any questions that you have. And then also maybe introduce Suresh to who will be on site. So.
Ishan has raised his hand.
Perfect. Yeah, let's go for it.
Hi, am I audible?
Yeah,
Yep.
Great. Actually, I just wanted to ask that I'll be making an IoT project. So what type of blockchain technology can I use in it?
Was that what kinds of blockchains can you use it with?
With IoT project? Actually, I was going through the problem statements. So I just wanted to ask that what type of blockchain can I use it?
That's a great question. Well, certainly for IoT, you would want the fastest, cheapest blockchain that you could. And at least for the layer 2 Ethereum virtual machines that we have integrated with thus far, I would say, just in my personal experience, Base is the fastest, best, cheapest one right now. It uses this optimism stack. So as far as high volume, basically where is the cheapest block space, I guess, is like a good question to ask. And of course, Solana was brought up earlier today, and they're great, and their block space is also extremely cheap. It's just you have to code everything in Rust, and they don't have quite the library of tools that Ethereum has. But yeah, that would be maybe the two places to point you to. One for a proof of concept where you're not scaling to billions of transactions with your IoT app. I would just use Base. It'll work really good for you, and it can probably scale up to a certain point. And then I would say beyond that, the optimism will continue to solve the scaling issue, and then you won't have to worry about it. Or maybe at some point way down the line, you start maybe referencing a Solana block space instead.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also trying to support by answering your questions in the chat. So check the chat as well. But any other questions? I am looking forward to meeting all of you in October when we have our final event.
Yeah, and we've already booked the venue, right? You already know the dates. It's October 17th and 18th. That is in Pushambi, and Garrett will be there. Garrett and Ivan, the winners from this hackathon. You all will get to meet Ivan and Garrett and all these other great folks who are traveling from all around the world. You'll get to see me on Tuesday and Wednesday running here and there.
All right, ask any questions. Remember, one of the judging criteria is a functioning deployed app. So ask all the questions you can ask now because Garrett is here. Oh, this is a good opportunity. We should introduce Suresh as a resource who will be there. Garrett, apparently you look like Mr. Beast.
That's right. 300 million less followers. Actually, I don't know if you want to be Mr. Beast these days.
Okay, so I see a question here. How can you relate Web3 to a website? So a website, I can just break it down. Like, let's say a website, there's a front end and a back end, right? Similar to how you can use Web3, Web3 can power the back end. You can think of it like a database, that you're storing data on. It could be login data. It could be, there's a lot of ways to use Web3, and that's why RAIRprotocol is trying to make it easier. But I think you just at a high level, there's a front end, there's a back end. If you think of the blockchain as a back end, it's like the technology that's powering the front end pulls the queries. So everything you're learning in the Web2 world applies. You just need to utilize, and that communication layer is RAIRprotocol, actually.
Yeah.
Questions?
Very well said.
Yeah, there's someone raised the hand.
Source.
Yeah, Karthik has raised his hand. Karthik, please feel free to unmute yourself. Okay.
By mistake. Oh, that's okay. Say hi. There's a lot of people here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Lights. Go ahead.
Yeah. Let's see. Vansh has a question.
Okay, great.
Vansh, please go ahead.
Catherine has a great question. Garrett, I think you should hit. Oh, Vansh.
Want a drink?
No.
Oh.
Too early for drinking for me.
Yeah. Well, it's here right time in Asia.
All right, Garrett, can you answer Catherine's question?
Yeah, definitely. I can create smart contracts with ease, but then when I deploy it, it's hard. Yes, it is hard. It's certainly hard to deploy smart contracts because they're very low level. They basically execute directly directly on the blockchain. And that's how, that's the whole reason to make a dApp, is to basically build a nice front end and then have a nice syncing engine effectively to then build a nice experience around your smart contracts. Otherwise, yeah, they're very hard to interact with natively. So yeah, I would say that question too, our approach of giving you a pre-built Mongo off-chain database, a pre-built Alchemy syncing engine, and then a pre-built front end, you can use those things to then basically suck that data off of the blockchain and then interact with it in your application. And then, so one other little note on deployment too. Yeah, a lot of that is hard hat tooling, at least for the Solidity side. We typically don't touch that stuff too much. We just kind of write it and audit it, and then basically use other people's. One note on security: it's usually a really good idea to use like the Open Zeppelin standards or these other standards that have been written, because if you don't use a standard, then it could potentially like steal people's money. So, be careful. But yeah, so that would be the one other piece of advice, is just when deploying smart contracts, make sure to use off-the-shelf audited code.
I want to bring up the point here, Catherine. Building the UI is easy, but the deployment is hard. And I also see a lot of people talking about like the core blockchain development is difficult. Can you kind of walk them through, let's say, one scenario where RAIRprotocol can help? They can focus on the Web 2, and then the syncing engine and all those things are taking place with RAIR.
Yeah, totally. Deployment can be hard. Just because you build something or have it running on localhost doesn't necessarily mean it runs in the cloud as an IP address that is accessible, that people can access. So that would be my advice for the one takeaway, or one thing that makes our system really powerful and really useful, is actually just that it kind of makes you learn Docker. That'd be maybe my one takeaway, is that containerization is, and even if you're just don't want to do any DevOps or don't care about DevOps, it's still important. It takes a whole team. It's kind of like a whole basketball team that builds an application. You've got a front-end developer, a back-end developer, QA, DevOps, and they all work together to build something. And just having a little bit of familiarity, I think, with command line and Docker will really help your careers out a lot. Because ultimately, whatever your code is, even if you're not the one that's packaging it and containerizing it and shipping it off, that's still happening in any job that you'll get or in any production environment. So yeah, learning just a little bit about Docker, it's really not scary and not hard. It'll help you like 100 times with your deployment. So.
There's a few questions. This one has raised hand. Bidu has raised hand for a very long time. I don't know that they're conflicting the names, so I'll just pick the one that I can see up here. It's Bidu Mitra. Please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
I sure can.
Yeah.
So my question was, how can I connect this Web3 and blockchain technology to cybersecurity?
A cybersecurity question. Yeah, well, certainly a few notes on security. When you clone the repo, you can turn on all of the Dependabot stuff and code analysis tools in GitHub, which will give you some pointers to cybersecurity issues. That other note that I made earlier about only using audited, off-the-shelf, pre-written smart contracts, that's also a big cybersecurity thing. And then finally, one very specific, easy cybersecurity thing is when you deploy Docker, there's a default Docker password in the image. So just change that. Just put in a different password. Little stuff like that is actually really huge from a cybersecurity standpoint. And then finally, your ports. I don't want to get too into DevOps world, but having your firewalls configured and having your ports configured properly. If you do just the basic house cleaning kind of things, then your app will be at least generally secure. Of course, cybersecurity is this whole giant field, but at least just general advice, those basic steps.
Perfect. Thanks for answering that question, Garrett. Let's take one question from Prateek.
Sure.
Good evening, everyone. Am I audible?
Hey, you sound great.
I want to ask you that I already know about the Web 2 technologies, but how can I continue with the Web 3?
Yeah, how to continue with Web3. Well, here's some new, interesting things that we do. One, a lot of times I read the Ethereum improvement proposals as they're coming out because I'm a nerd and I'm interested in them and like them. So if you want to know kind of how to do more with Web3 and kind of where the future is, Well, one, of course, by just playing with it and interacting with it is a really good way to know the future of it. Go out and make accounts with Alchemy, make accounts with Web3 Auth, make accounts with Firebase, all these things. Those are the infrastructures and the toolings that are kind of powering a lot of the stuff under the hood. So understanding what they're up to is a good way to stay up with Web3. And of course, at the raw blockchain level, looking at the Ethereum improvement proposals is a good way to keep up with it. But honestly, the best way would just be to deploy a small little application and then just see how it works. And then kind of from there, you have a starting point to then keep up with all the changes.
Thank you.
Thanks for your question, Pratik. I see Catherine has raised her hand.
How do you make hard forks easy? How do you make hard forks easy to deal with? Well, this may sound, don't worry about hard forks. Generally, don't worry about the blockchain because it's so low level and it's like so out of your control. Like what happens if Bitcoin splits in half, or what happens if Ethereum Classic? You would just go into your environment variable file and replace, I want to point to this address, I want to point to this other address. So, really as just, regular developers who want to use Web3 to do something useful, I would say generally don't worry too much about the actual blockchain itself. Just kind of trust that like really smart people are under the hood, making it reliable. And if something crazy happens like a hard fork, there'll probably be a lot of people that can help you migrate to whatever the new one is.
Thank you so much, Karen. As we have only 5 minutes left in the meeting, let's take one more question from Piyush, where I see he has raised his hand. Piyush, please go ahead.
Hey, I wanted to ask which open source platform will be best for Solana for creating the whole marketplace with a platform inbuilt in it and a native token of it.
That's a good question. I don't know of an equivalent fully 100% open source version of a thing on Solana. I know it works a lot differently because it compiles to Rust and it's on a kind of totally different rails. I would say, though, there are a lot of things that you'll use that kind of look like they're open source because they put some front end code out there. But the only way that you can actually use it is to get an API secret key and then paste it in. And when you do that, it's totally fine for things like Alchemy and whatnot, big reputable companies. But yeah, your question for Solana, there's probably some centralized SaaS tooling out there that's probably equivalent for marketplaces. Just watch out, because if you can't see how the backend works and the backend's not open source, then it's kind of just like a risk for your project. So I don't know if that answered it directly, but at least we're quite focused, at least for now, kind of Ethereum wide. Also, I'll say, Sony just picked this Ethereum L2 chain yesterday to launch on. Anyways, but yeah, no aspersions on Solana, just a little bit different than what we do.
Okay, so I have a point to make here. So thank you everyone for your questions. We're wrapping up the meeting now, but Solana sounds like one of the most requested chains from this. So we actually have a partner, Solana U, which is the Solana University side of the project. So we're going to be working to bring on someone from Solana to be present at the hackathon. So stay tuned. We'll try to get somebody. I'm actually speaking with Solana Foundation right now. So if anybody here has somebody they know from Solana, feel free to introduce them to Simon or myself. We'll work hard to get Solana at the hackathon. But overall, like I want to say, thank you everyone for joining. I think we hit over 100 students at one point. But keep in mind that a lot of you aren't experienced in Web3. Some of you don't understand Docker or haven't used Docker. But this is why this hackathon, Hack India, exists. We're bringing in experts like Garrett and some of the other partners like Alchemy, Solana. We're bringing them to you. So there will be somebody from the team at RAIRprotocol. There's going to be someone from Alchemy with you, among you guys. So it's very important for you all to show up, definitely shake hands, get to know each other, get to know the other students, but also get to know these mentors. They're going to be there to help you answer questions like deployment. How do I use blockchain in my IoT project? We're putting the resources to help you create your projects. And one of the judging criteria is a functioning deployed app. So we're here to help you. You want to wrap it up, Simon?
Thanks everyone for joining. Thanks to Kat for giving this session. We will have Suresh from the RAIR Tech team in the hackathon in person. He'll be there both days. So if you are working on RAIR Tech, you will have someone at the hackathon to help you out. Suresh will also be a part of the WhatsApp group that we have, right? So use that WhatsApp group very actively. You can also, have some fun there, but use that WhatsApp group as much as you can to ask all your Q&A. And we're gonna have some talent rounds. So yeah, that's how we'll wrap it up, and we'll see you at the hackathon.
Nice. All right.
Gary, you got to mute him.
Well, I
Instagram
can only
follow,
mute
follow
everybody.
me on Instagram, guys. Follow me on Instagram.
Just
Follow
mute
me on
everybody.
Instagram, guys. Ashish Kumar, follow me on Instagram.
Okay. Anyway, all right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining.